During the gait cycle, the first step is the heel strike, where your hip is at 30 degrees, your knee is at 5 degrees, and your ankle is at 5 degrees of dorsiflexion. Your foot is at 3 degrees of inversion. During flat foot, your hip is at 30 degrees, your knee is at 5 to 20 degrees, your ankle is at 10 degrees of plantar flexion, and your foot is at 2 degrees of inversion. During mid stance, your hip is at 0 degrees of flexion, your knee is at 5 degrees of flexion, your ankle is at 10 degrees plantar flexion, and your foot is at 2 degrees eversion. Then it is heel off. The hip is at 10 degrees of flexion, the knee is 0, and then the ankle is 0 as well. Then there is toe off, where the hip is at 10 degrees of extension, the knee is at 35 degrees of flexion, the ankle is at 20 degrees of plantar flexion, and the foot is at 6 degrees of inversion.
Okay, so now I'll be doing the swing phase. I'll be coming off from what Delilah had, which was the toe off. And in the swing phase, I'll be doing acceleration. So in the hip, you have 10 to 20 hip flexion. At the knee, you're gonna be having 35 to 60 degrees of flexion. And then at the ankle, you'll be having neutral to dorsiflexion. And in your foot, you'll be inverting. So then now I'll be going to mid-swing, and at mid-swing, my hip will be 20 to 30 degrees of flexion. My knee will then be 60 degrees of flexion. My ankle will now be still the same, neutral to dorsiflexion, and my foot will be inverting. So now I'll be doing the acceleration, which now my hip will be 30 degrees of flexion. My knee will now be at 60 to 0 degrees of flexion. My ankle will now be to 0 to almost like plantar flexion. And then my foot will now be inverted as well.